To help my father have a grandson, he actually had me go out and deceive people. I never expected that my first time, I would end up tricking such a big shot. The legendary General Qin, after being missing for 3 whole months, actually returned without a scratch. When others asked him where he had gone, he refused to say a single word. He kept a cold face and ignored everyone. It wasn't until his most respected emperor asked him that he stammered a reply. I was deceived. Deceived into what? Deceived into leaving an heir. 3 years later, General Qin was deceived again. A few years after that, General Qin was deceived yet again. General Qin was absolutely fuming. I am merely thinking that I will collect the debt with interest in the future. At the foot of the mountain sat a small estate. I was sitting with my legs crossed, slowly eating a flour pastry, while admiring the view outside the pavilion. A yuan, you'll be 18 after the new year. If you keep delaying like this, you'll be an old maid in the blink of an eye. I will ask you one more time. Will you take in a husband, or will you marry into a family? I won't do either. You must choose one. There is no room for refusal. I don't want to choose. Father was both angry and helpless, pacing back and forth in the pavilion. We've been staying here for 2 months now, and every matchmaker for miles has worn their feet out. You look down on this one, and you're not satisfied with that one. What kind of person do you actually want? A god from the heavens, or a dragon prince from the deep? Oh, you're going to be the death of me. And let me ask you one thing, father. Why must I get married? I've traveled the world with you since I was 3. By 5, I could work an abacus with both hands. By 8, I was earning more than you. Now, I have hundreds of thousands of taels of silver in various banks, enough to live a comfortable and happy life forever. Why would I need to be supported by a man? Father choked on his words. After a moment, he finally blurted out, you are our only daughter, my dear child. You must ensure the Shen family line continues. What is difficult about that? Don't worry, leave it to me. As long as you stop pestering me, within 10 years, I will surely produce a few for you. You, just look at you. You say anything that comes to mind. You don't have a shred of feminine grace. I truly regret raising you like a boy all these years. You, who would you even have them with? Is there already someone you fancy? Who is it? The gods in heaven are too far away, so I shall choose a dragon prince instead. Father rolled his eyes in frustration and stormed off in a huff. I rose elegantly, straightened my robe, and was about to head to the counting house, when suddenly, a flash of blinding white caught my eye from upstream. In the clear river water, a youth in white was clinging to a piece of driftwood, his eyes tightly shut, his complexion deathly pale from the icy water. Oh my, a dragon prince has actually arrived. Somebody has fallen into the water. Save him at once. By evening, I was clicking my abacus in the counting house when I heard my maids Chunkyuo and Shahi giggling softly at the door. What are you laughing at? Mistress, the young gentleman you saved today is incredibly handsome. My lady, you look quite dashing in men's clothing, but compared to his grace, features, and stature, he is practically every woman's dream lover. You have no ambition. Yet when I saw the unconscious, strikingly handsome youth, I had even less ambition than them. I stared at him for a long time. What does the doctor say? Rest assured, my lady. The doctor says this gentleman did not drown. He likely fell from a height and injured his head, which caused him to lose consciousness. With 2 days of rest, he will be fine once he wakes up. My gaze could not move away for the longest time. I asked, does he have any identification? A waist pendant or a name card? The servant pointed at the young man's firm, slender waist. Only a small crystal clear jade pendant, nothing else. I finally managed to shift my eyes to the jade pendant. Seeing its unique color and excellent quality, I thought to myself, this man must come from an extraordinary background. On the 3rd day, the handsome young man woke up. He was endlessly grateful to me, his savior. I am Qin Shu, from the capital. He saluted me with a proud and imposing air. I introduced myself, Shen Yi, 17 years old, from Jiangzhou. He said he was traveling for his studies and had accidentally been separated from his companions. He had intended to take a wooden boat south along the waterway, but not being familiar with the terrain, he fell off a cliff at a waterfall. In a daze, he grabbed onto a piece of driftwood and lost consciousness. I let him stay at the manor to recover. We played chess and chatted, painted and recited poetry. We soon became bosom friends who could talk about anything. Father is here. Followed by a long procession of matchmakers, I sighed, rubbing my temples. Father smiled obsequiously, explaining over and over, my good daughter, I'll listen to you. I won't force you to take a husband into the family, nor will I force you to marry. I've had them find you the most handsome man. As long as you can conceive a child, I'll give him 100 taels of gold, and let him leave immediately after. The matchmakers swarmed around me, chattering away, their noise making my eardrums ache. I tossed out a dozen gold nuggets, and finally the surroundings grew quiet, thinking I was just humoring him again. Father resorted to his usual antics, wailing, throwing a fit, and threatening to hang himself, watching his 200-pound frame, which had already crushed 2 stools, moving over to the large round table, insisting he had to hang himself. I could feel a throbbing in my temples. Father, I already have a candidate in mind. Father immediately scrambled off to see Qin Shu, chatting with him with great enthusiasm, practically prying into his family history back to the 18th generation. Though Qin Shu was utterly bewildered, he answered politely. That night, Father came back brimming with excitement. My good daughter, that young man is excellent. He is tall and strong, handsome in appearance, learned and and skilled in martial arts, and he hasn't taken any wives or concubines. Most importantly, his family line is flourishing. He said he has several older brothers and sisters, all of whom have many children of their own, so he will surely be the same. He is the one. I was moved as well, yet I felt somewhat uneasy. He has a pure character, but his life experience is still limited, not for lack of ability. It is just that he is a man of great principle. What if his family values their bloodline above all else? What if they refuse to let the child belong to the Shen family? What should I do then? My heart was moved yet unsettled, but whenever I thought of the pure dew-like clarity in Qin Shu's eyes, I could not help but hesitate. That night, my dreams were filled with Qin Shu's tall, heroic silhouette. Chunkao hurried in to report, "Mistress, young Master Qin is here to bid us farewell. He says he is leaving tomorrow to find his friends." A strange aching bitterness welled up in my heart. That evening, I prepared a lavish banquet to see him off. Qin Shu gazed at me with profound intensity, saying he was deeply reluctant to part ways. "If you are so reluctant, why must you leave?" Qin Shu took the crystal jade pendant from his waist and gifted it to me, telling me that if I ever go north for business in the future, I must look for him in the capital. "Where should I look for you?" "The general's mansion on Yongfu Street. I am a second-rank guard in the household. I grew up there since I was a child. Everyone knows me. When the time comes, just say you are looking for little Qin, and someone will surely guide you to me. Life is short. I only wish to seize the present, and not pine for the days to come. Then let us drink to the present. Brother Qin, please." I steeled my heart, and took out the 3-day dream I had purchased from the Hu merchants. "Brother Shen, I have heard this wine is quite unique. They say one sip keeps you intoxicated for 3 days and 3 nights. Is that true? It certainly smells rich and mellow." I shook my head. "I have never tasted it myself. This one small bottle cost over 300 taels. Hey, don't drink so fast. Truly a rare treasure worth over 300 taels." Qin Shu was completely drunk, and as he held me, he began to hum General's command. I gazed at his handsome face so close to mine. My heart stirred and restless, and I leaned in to kiss him. He seemed to possess an innate talent for it, quickly shifting from passive to active until it was beyond my control. For 3 days, he drifted between sobriety and intoxicated haze, never letting me go. "Ayuan, why did you deceive me?" Exhausted and drifting into sleep, I replied testily, "To have your seed. To trick you into fatherhood." "Understood." By the evening of the 3rd day, father having already packed waited at the ferry with the servants. I left a stack of banknotes and the deed to the villa beside Qin Shu, then boarded the ship resolutely and sailed away, trading by sea. The journey is long, full of both danger and monotony, yet father and I were long accustomed to it. We headed south along the river, straight toward the estuary, journeying continuously southward. By the time we arrived in the Malay kingdom, over a month had passed. As soon as we landed, father dragged me through the city in search of the best physician. After some back and forth, father hurriedly had the foreign doctor check my pulse, repeatedly gesturing toward my lower abdomen. "Sir, Shahi," standing nearby, couldn't watch any longer, and whispered, "My lady is surely with child. Why won't you believe it?" Father laughed sheepishly and replied happily, "I just want a proper doctor to take a look, to ensure there are no mistakes." The old physician asked a few questions, to which I replied in the fluent local tongue. Then, the old physician stroked his beard and smiled, nodding repeatedly at father. "Oh." Father was so excited he was practically dancing. He immediately bowed to the heavens over and over. "The Shen family finally has an heir. My dear daughter, you're going to be a mother, and I'm going to be a grandfather." "Haha, sir, it is maternal grandfather. Who cares? In any case, since he is my daughter's child, he is a Shen. He has nothing to do with that Qin boy. None of that maternal nonsense." "That is right. This child belongs to our family. I suppose I've finally gotten what I wanted. I have a child, and the debt is paid. Brother Qin, from here on, we part ways. I hope we never meet again." As time went on, I gave birth to a chubby baby boy amidst my busy travels. I named him Shen Muqin. Father laughed out loud, but his face was streaked with tears. He wouldn't let the baby out of his arms. I was full of joy too, but that joy didn't last long before it vanished. The reality of child rearing left me nearly shattered. I simply left the boy with father and Chunkao and the others, put on my men's clothes, and got back to making money. Poor Chunkao and Shahi, having never been mothers themselves, were forced to take on the exhausting chore of childcare. Though I complained about it constantly, whenever I was away for more than 2 days, I couldn't stop missing the little round boy. I'd have to rush to finish my business and hurry back. A year later, over 50 ships full of cargo from the mainland had all been sold. We had made a fortune. I spent a lazy half-year resting, and seeing that my son could already speak several local languages, I took my time arranging the shipments to return home. "Mother, why don't I have a father? He passed away. He died for his country. He passed away young. He was a remarkable hero. You should be proud of him and cherish his memory." What was my father's name? I was momentarily at a loss for words. "Mother, did you forget father's name? What did he look like?" "Haha, it has been so long. I can't recall at the moment." My son sighed in disappointment. He turned to ask He instead. "He was a young gentleman, very handsome. When you grow up, just look in the mirror to see what he looked like." After 2 months of tossing and turning at sea, the dozens of large ships finally reached the shore safely. Father and my son had been cooped up for too long. They dumped all the chores on me and headed off happily to stroll through town with my chubby boy. "Master, I hadn't even stepped off the ship yet when the head manager who looked after our business along the route ran over in a panic. "Master, did you receive the carrier pigeons that I sent you?" Traveling past so many islands on this journey, the terrain was chaotic. I hadn't received a single message. Upon hearing this, the manager almost burst into tears. He was frantic and at a complete loss. "I knew it. Otherwise you wouldn't have been so late returning. Master, something terrible has happened. You are a wanted fugitive." "What did you say?" The manager explained in a rush. "I don't know the reason either. 3 months after you set sail, wanted posters were put up at every city gate, offering a bounty of 100 gold bars for a young man named Shen Yi. The portrait bears a 70 or 80% resemblance to you." I was completely bewildered. I asked in confusion, "I have never committed any crimes while abroad. How could there be a warrant for my arrest? What is this Shen Yi accused of doing? Fraud and deception, swindling people out of their money and affections. I always use my real name when doing business. I only use an alias when checking into lodging. When have I ever swindled anyone out of money or affection? I had absolutely no idea. Master, for your own safety, you must stop dressing as a man. And you can no longer use that alias." I felt deeply aggrieved. "Which government office issued the warrant for Shen Yi? I am willing to pay a handsome sum to hire a lawyer to clear my name." "It is the imperial court." "Master, our business has grown quite large over the years, and it is inevitable that we attract some envy. If the imperial court gets angry, this entire enterprise could be wiped out in an instant." "Very well. I am a mother now. It is no longer convenient for me to constantly appear in men's clothing. I have always been someone who knows when to yield and when to stand tall." I smiled and agreed. So I changed into women's clothing, styled my hair like a married woman, and resumed my real name Shen Jiwan. Exotic tropical goods were extremely rare in the inland regions. Scarcity makes goods valuable. I shipped most of the cargo inland, to sell to wealthy families, keeping only 1 cart of pearls and a few carts of coral, which I entrusted to a security firm to deliver to the capital. The rest of the goods sold out very quickly. Passing through the central plain, I happened to encounter a severe drought. The crops had failed completely, and the common people were displaced, fleeing everywhere to escape the famine. I took out 1,000 taels of silver and had the manager in Lucheng hire a dozen or so women to serve porridge daily until the drought eased. Afterwards, I headed to a villa in the outskirts of Lucheng to stay temporarily, intending to set off for the capital 2 days later. Unexpectedly, at noon the following day, the junior steward of the villa hurried in to report, "My lady, a group of men has suddenly arrived outside. The leader claims to be Governor Liu of Lucheng. He says General Qin has been sent by the imperial court for disaster relief. Having heard of your generous charity in providing porridge to the people, they have come specifically to pay you a visit." I gave a light response. Noticing a terrace right beside me, I decided to walk up the steps. Though the party was small, each man was mounted on a tall, powerful steed, wearing the signature silver armor of the Imperial Guard. From afar, they looked quite imposing. Suddenly, the man on the leading white charger locked his gaze firmly upon me. He was tall and athletic, dressed in a green martial outfit, with his dark hair tied up high. He carried an air of nobility, and his features were surprisingly familiar. Just then, as if sensing my scrutiny, he gracefully turned his head to look my way. I was so startled I nearly fell from the railing. "Careful!" Chunka caught me behind, crying out in alarm. "My lady, what are you doing?" I sat back down in a flurry, taking several deep breaths. That man just now, it was my old nemesis. Could he really be Governor Liu of Lucheng? "Qin Shu, General Qin." I steadied my forehead, gasping for air. If it truly is General Qin, I might have to jump off this terrace today to escape. Immediately, I urged Chunka to fetch 10,000 taels in silver notes. "Steward, go and tell Governor Liu, say that I am a widow, and it is improper for me to meet strange men. Add another line, that I have spent months traveling, and am currently bedridden with illness, unable to get out of bed. I hope both of you will forgive me. In appreciation of General Qin and Governor Liu's tireless efforts for the disaster relief, my Quan trading house is willing to donate 10,000 taels of silver as a modest contribution. May Lucheng overcome these hardships soon." The steward replied, "As you command." He hurried off. A moment later, the sound of hooves faded away outside the gate. I asked with a trembling voice, "That young man on the white horse, was he General Qin?" Although puzzled, the steward nodded and said, "Indeed. I heard Governor Liu address him with great respect just now, calling him General Qin. Mistress, this General Qin is the most trusted commander of His Majesty. With brilliant military achievements, his fame is widespread." Enough. I cut him off immediately and said urgently, "Pack our luggage at once. We are taking the shortcut to the capital. Hurry." Our group quickly took the carriage and departed from Lucheng. After arriving in the capital, I did not dare to delay even for a moment. I rushed to the courier agency to retrieve the pearls, coral, and 2 carts of treasures. Then, I spread the word, selling them with great urgency to ensure a quick sale. I did not hesitate to lower the prices, attracting a constant stream of officials and merchants. I dared not show my face and only told the shopkeeper to make a profit if possible, or just break even to unload the goods. Everything had to be cleared within half a month. After selling steadily for over 10 days, I had Chunkao arrange for the maids to pack our belongings and secure a fast boat. We were to set off down the canal early the next morning. Chunkao agreed. Mistress, the master instructed me. They say the capital has many trinkets, so let me pick a few of each to take back for the young master. Fine. I clicked the abacus beads without even looking up. Just go to the accounting office for the silver. Chunkao nodded and left the room. It wasn't until noon that she returned, breathless and carrying bags of all sizes. A short while later, the guard at the door cupped his hands to report, "My lady." When Chunkao was on her way back, she was followed by two men in secret. Their behavior was very suspicious. I raised an eyebrow. Did you send someone to tail them back? We already have, but there is no news yet. I summoned Chunkao while you were out on the street. Did you encounter anyone suspicious? No. Why? Chunkao looked completely oblivious. I just bought whatever caught my eye and strolled through quite a few streets. I offered a shy smile and said to the general's manor steward, "I am the Lady Jen, hailing from Jiangzhou and an old acquaintance of Master Qin Shu. My family has suffered a misfortune, so I traveled a long way to pay a visit." "I see." The head steward nodded and bowed politely. "Please come inside and rest, miss. The general has just returned to the city and is currently at the palace. Master Qin will be back at the manor very soon." Shortly after, a maid served fragrant tea and snacks. I thanked her warmly. "Thank you, dear beauty, but could I trouble you for a cup of plain water? I'm not used to fragrant tea." Chunko glanced at me in confusion. She quickly lowered her head. The maid respectfully acknowledged the request. She turned around and brought back some warm water. Though I am no unparalleled beauty, my features are quite pleasant to look at. Raised in wealth, I have traveled the world with confidence and ease. My eyes carry a sense of confidence and spirit, with a bright and generous disposition. After a few words of flattery, the young maid was coaxed into growing fond of me. In our back-and-forth exchange, she spilled about 70 or 80% of what goes on in the general's manor. I heard General Qin is still unmarried, with neither wife nor concubine, and not even a bedchamber maid. I secretly rejoiced to myself, "Son, Mom really picked the right father for you." Just as I was secretly celebrating, hurried footsteps suddenly echoed from outside the door. Before I could even see who it was, I heard an angry roar. "Samani, seize her." Under the brilliant sun, a heroic man in his battle robe strode toward me. His thick brows were knitted together, his handsome face cold and stern, overflowing with rage. The dashing young man from 3 years ago had transformed, his features now carrying a composed, sharp edge, and his entire being permeated with the aura of the battlefield. My heart pounded wildly. My son's father has become even more handsome. Before I knew it, several guards rushed in at his command, instantly surrounding Chunkao and me. I was stunned. "Take us? Tie us up?" The very next instant, I quickly dipped my fingers in the cup of water and smeared it across my face, crying out with a sob. "Ashu!" The handsome man stopped abruptly at the doorway. I looked at him, my eyes brimming with tears, my voice plaintive. "I have finally found you, Qin Shu." "No, I should call you General Qin instead." General Qin locks his dark, intense gaze on me and sneers coldly. "Looking for me? It should be me looking for you. What a fine job, Shen Yi. My father sent me overseas." I speak up first, faking tears while wiping the water off my face. "Father wouldn't let me come to the capital to find you." I begged him in every way, but he remained unmoved. I pleaded for over 2 whole years. If not for the kindness of the mistress of the Quanda firm in offering me passage, I wouldn't have been able to return to the country even now. Ashu, seeing me sobbing with tears streaming down my face, General Qin furrows his brows even deeper and waves his hand, agitated and distracted. The guards all lower their heads and retreat respectfully. He steps closer, but stops 3 feet away from me. "Why did you disappear without a word? Do you have any idea that I spent more than 2 months searching bitterly for you near the villa?" His eyes are full of resentment and pain. It is clear that I hurt him deeply back then. I sob. Feeling wrong. When father saw that I was infatuated with you and had even given myself to you, he flew into a rage. He originally wanted to take you into our household as a son-in-law, but you said the marriage required your elder's consent and politely declined. Father was angry that I wouldn't listen, so he had people force me onto a ship. That very night we left the villa and sailed south into the open sea. With the vast ocean all around, I had nowhere to escape and no way to send a message. It wasn't until I met Mistress Shen that I was finally able to return home. Father, for the sake of our chubby grandson, I have to wrong you by making you play the villain. Mistress Shen. General Qin's eyes narrow with suspicion, looking toward Chunkao. "I saw this girl on the street a few days ago. The place she returned to was the Quantade trading firm. Are you staying there?" I nodded. Master Shen is kind-hearted, pitying our master-servant duo. He let us enter the city with the firm's cargo and provided us with a place to stay. General Qin looked at me with a complicated gaze, wanting to say something but holding back. I sniffled and said softly, "Ashu, that you have spent these years searching for me in vain is my fault. I traveled thousands of miles to finally keep the promise I made back then and come to the capital to find you. I only ask that you forgive me. To see you one more time in this life is all a Yuan could ask for. After saying this, I gave him a graceful bow. Seeing that you are well today, my mind is at ease. I wish you a smooth official career and a life of peace. I must take my leave now. General Qin was startled, and with a long reach, he gripped my wrist firmly. You are leaving again? Where to? My eyes blurred with tears, and I whispered. After I returned to the country, I saw wanted posters at every city gate. I had them taken down immediately. He said urgently, when I couldn't find you back then, I was frantic with worry, thinking of your heartless words that day. I went to the authorities to issue the warrant. Who knew the search would last 3 years, with not a single lead? I never imagined you had been kidnapped overseas. I continued to wipe my tears on the surface, but in my heart I secretly scoffed. People in power really are not to be trifled with. After one night together, you turn around and put out a bounty on me across the whole country. I even left you silver notes and the deed to the property. Chunkao chimed in from the side to help. Young Master Qin, my mistress is certainly not a heartless woman. The master had only one daughter, and was bent on finding her a husband to take into the family. Who would have known she was so deeply enamored with you? The master, in a fit of rage, was the one who forced her away. These past 3 years, my mistress has wept day and night, refusing to marry another. Her only wish was to return and find you. General Qin frowned in distress and reached out to pull me tightly into his arms. It is enough that you're back, Yuan. I have finally found you. I rolled my eyes in secret. It was clearly me who came knocking on your door myself. Chunkao tactfully retreated to the corner. General Qin held me for a long while before finally letting go with reluctance, gently smoothing my hair. Yuan, you may rest easy living here in the estate. I cannot. This is a high-ranking official's residence. I am but a common woman. It is not appropriate for me to stay long. Chunkao, and I shall find somewhere else to live. Yuan, there is something you do not know. I am no longer a second-rank Imperial Guard, but a first-rank Imperial Guard. I have been promoted. I have an independent courtyard within the estate. It is quiet and elegant. Just come back with me. Don't leave. This does not follow the rules. How does it not? You and I were already man and wife in all but name. Had you not been forcibly taken away back then, I would have brought you to the capital long ago. We would not have wasted these 3 years in vain. And those guards just now, why were they so fierce? Now that I've finally found you, I was afraid you'd run off again, so I ordered them to stop you first. I let out a forced chuckle. If I hadn't reacted quickly and taken the initiative, I probably would have been hogtied and thrown into a dungeon by now. Afterward, General Qin briskly settled me into a charming little courtyard, tenderly urging me to settle in and stay. But how could I possibly be at ease? My heart was in a constant state of turmoil. Is your family home truly in Jiangzhou? Why is it that after having my people investigate for so long, there is no record of your father or you in the household registry? My heart tightened, but I kept a calm expression and replied, ever since my great-grandfather's time, my clan has spent years doing business overseas, so we are no longer registered in our original hometown. My father keeps my identity papers with him, and to this day, I don't have them on me, which makes traveling quite inconvenient. Don't worry, in a few days, I'll arrange for a Beijing registry and identity papers for you. I smiled and nodded, reunited after so long. We still talked about everything under the sun, getting along harmoniously. He was no longer on duty, and spent almost every day in the courtyard savoring our time together. In moments of passion, he poured out all the longing and bitterness he'd kept inside for 3 years. He said that the 3-day dream back then hadn't left him completely intoxicated. There were many moments when his mind was perfectly clear. He said that when he found out I was a woman, he was both surprised and delighted. He also said that he had long ago fallen for me body and soul. Over these 3 years, he had practically traveled the whole world. He went to Jiangzhou alone more than 20 times. At first he thought I was just toying with him, using him just to bear his heirs, which made him so angry he gritted his teeth. That was why he ordered a warrant for my arrest. I laughed softly at his behavior. The father of my child. I was just too young back then. How could my intuition have been wrong? Seeing me laugh at him, both embarrassed and annoyed, he pressed me down onto the daybed and pulled the quilt over us to hide us away. The room filled with tenderness. After a few days, I truly couldn't handle his intensity and urged him to go back to his duties, but he refused to leave, kissing the top of my head. I have already taken 3 months of leave from the general to make up for the 3 years of heartache. We spent a few more days doting on each other. When Chunkao brought in chicken soup, she couldn't help but remind me, my lady, have you forgotten why we came to the capital? I haven't forgotten. I'm just finding a way to keep him steady. Chunkao rolled her eyes in secret and whispered, I think you've been completely dazed by him and have pushed our real business to the back of your mind. What date is it today? It is already the 16th. The shopkeeper says the goods have long since sold out, and as you instructed, everything has been converted into gold bricks and hidden. I nodded in satisfaction. Mistress, we cannot delay any longer. If General Qin finds out the truth, He surely will not let this go. It is not like I can just walk away. It is that you don't want to leave. I gave a sheepish smile. To be honest, I really am a bit reluctant to leave the father of my child. Suddenly, my heart tightened. We haven't been careful at all these past few days. My body has always been healthy. My cycles are regular, and I'm in my prime. I fear I may be pregnant again. No, I must escape as soon as possible. That night, I nestled into his shoulder, drifting off to sleep. He kissed my cheek and whispered, Yuan, I have already prepared your household registration and travel papers for the capital. In the past few days, I have also secured a reliable benefactor for you. Once His Majesty and the Empress return from their southern tour, I shall enter the palace and petition for a decree to grant us marriage. Marriage? The father of my children. Isn't it enough just to stay here like this? Why must you make such a fuss? Yet, deep down, a flicker of warmth unexpectedly stirred. Ashu, I am but a merchant's daughter, while you are a top-tier guard at the general's manor. With a bright future ahead, our stations are simply too mismatched. Perhaps you will have to endure some hardship for a while. Once you conceive an heir, I will find a way to elevate you to a concubine. A concubine, a single word, instantly extinguished every ounce of my reluctance and longing. I waited over 10 more days, and finally, news arrived of His Majesty's return from the southern tour. General Qin immediately departed for the palace, and I, having feigned compliance, seized the opportunity to step out of the courtyard. I wandered around the general's manor twice, and none of the servants stopped me. Each one was polite and respectful. I deliberately pestered the steward with endless questions, until he was dizzy and confused. My maid and I wished to head out to purchase some personal items. May we exit through the side gate? The steward replied, certainly you may. The general has given orders to have guards accompany the two of you. That won't be necessary. The two of us will be quite fine. The steward, suspecting nothing, prepared a carriage and dispatched 4 armed guards to accompany us. We strolled through the city, eating and exploring, buying everything in sight along the way. All expenses are to be charged to the general's estate. We wandered for several hours until the sun began to set. Just then, someone on the street suddenly beat a gong and shouted, voice thick with excitement, His Majesty has bestowed a marriage upon General Qin, a double celebration for the general. The eldest daughter of Grand Tutor Lu and the daughter of Minister Luo of the Ministry of Personnel shall both enter the estate on the same day. General Qin will take his official wife in 3 months' time. Sitting in the carriage, I listened quietly. As my heart gave a sharp tug, I rubbed my chest, then let out a wry, hollow laugh. What is there to hurt for? This has only given me a perfectly valid reason to leave. Immediately, I signaled Chun Kao to send the signal. A moment later, the accompanying guards and the carriage driver were all knocked unconscious by incense. She and I had already taken the antidote. In less than a quarter of an hour, my people arrived in haste, successfully whisking us away. Before the sky turned dark, we successfully exited the city and boarded the merchant ship waiting at the pier in the suburbs. Miss, look, General Qin. He is chasing after us. He brought so many men. I walked out of the cabin with poise, standing on the deck watching him gallop toward us on horseback. I offered only a faint smile. Hey Yuan, I waved gently. Furious, he yanked on the reins of his steed and let out a piercing roar. Get back here at once. Stop. There is no need for further words. General, please head back. How dare you lie to me about your identity? Your real name is Shenju Yuan, isn't it? Get back here now. General, you deceived me quite a few times yourself. We are even now. Neither of us owes the other anything. My status, Shenju Yuan, is far too humble to be worthy of you. Ultimately, we are not meant to be. Before I leave, I have 2 final truths to give you. I would rather walk this path alone than share a husband with another. Get back here. Yuan, come back. And the second truth is the same as before. I only wanted your seed, and was just greedy for your body. Shenju Yuan. My thanks, General. Farewell. Having said that, I turned and walked directly into the cabin. The merchant ship carried little cargo, and the journey was smooth and steady. Before dawn the next day, I led my men to quietly leave the ship. The cargo was either thrown into the water or destroyed completely. Then, splattered with blood, it was staged to look like a pirate raid, with bodies cast into the sea. Afterward, we traveled slowly westward by carriage. My father had received a message by carrier pigeon from the shopkeeper in the capital days ago, and had long since packed our valuables, prepared several spacious carriages, and set off with my son to meet me. Over 10 days later, we successfully reunited in a small town on the western border. My chubby son ran toward me with joy. Chun Kao quickly stepped forward to scoop him up. From today on, you must not bump into mother, and you cannot run or play with her either. My son looked utterly disappointed. Why? Father looked just as puzzled. Yes, why? My dear daughter, why is your complexion so poor? Why have you rushed here in such a state? Did we not agree to return to our hometown for a few months? Such a long and exhausting journey. You must be exhausted. I merely gave a small giggle. Father looked even more bewildered. He turned to look at Chun Cao. What is your mistress giggling about? Chun Cao replied, beaming with joy. Master, My lady is pregnant again, judging by the time it has been about 2 months. She has been sensitive to fishy smells lately, frequently nauseous, and cannot sleep well either, which is why her complexion is poor. Oh my goodness. Father was stunned for a moment, then excitedly slapped his thigh. That is wonderful. Good, good, good. I'm going to have another grandchild. This one must be a granddaughter. A boy and a girl. A perfect pair. When my son heard that I was carrying a little sister, he danced with joy. I want a little sister. Unlike my first pregnancy, I suffered from severe morning sickness with this one. I often couldn't keep any food down and felt dizzy and weak. Father immediately bought a large house nearby so I could rest and nurture the pregnancy in peace. He also hired 2 chefs to make exactly the meals I enjoyed. It wasn't until a few days later that he finally realized, my dear daughter, whose child is this you are carrying? I rolled my eyes at him. Who else could it be? Naturally, it is still the same one from before. I am quite devoted after all. Father was dumbfounded. Where did you two meet? In the capital. In Huzhou. It was just a chance encounter. Old feelings were rekindled for a moment. His family holds a prominent position in the capital, and I didn't dare let him know about the pregnancy. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to leave, so I hurried to the northwest to get as far away as possible. Father laughed heartily and gave me a thumbs up. If you want it, have it. It's not like our family can't afford to raise one more. Just focus on your pregnancy, and I'll help take care of the child. I looked at my son sleeping soundly nearby, my expression softening involuntarily. Father, the child is still very young. I need to be here for him. My health hasn't been great this pregnancy, so I'm not in a state to be traveling. As for the goods from our various shops, let's have a security firm escort them. Earning a little less is fine. Father looked troubled. But don't you still have an old man like me? You're getting on in years. It's time you rested too. We have plenty of family wealth. If we're careful with our spending, it's enough to last a dozen lifetimes. Earning a bit less for a while doesn't mean we're stopping entirely. Father had no choice but to agree. You're right. The child is the most important thing now. I did some careful calculation. The situation in the Northwest has been unstable lately, and with the nations not trading with each other, there isn't much profit to be made here. However, the medicinal herbs here are high quality and cheap. Compared to the capital and the Jiangnan region, the price gap is huge. There's a lot of potential profit. Let's buy more herbs and slowly transport them to the southeastern coast to sell. Father nodded quickly. Good. With a new business venture and using the excuse of resting for the pregnancy, we settled down in the Northwest for good, far away from the gossip and trouble of the capital. Considering the unrest in the Northwest, I paid handsomely to hire skilled martial artists for protection. Word spread quickly. Soon, a security team of several hundred men had gathered around me. Having traveled extensively since I was young, I have a real knack for learning languages. My son takes after Qin Shu in every way, except for this. I took him with me as we wandered the borderlands between various nations. In just a few months, he was already able to converse fluently with the locals. Half a year later, I opened an herbal shop at the border. We purchased premium herbs found in the mountains. Because our offers were fair and we paid in cash promptly, our reputation began to spread and our business grew ever larger. A month later, I safely gave birth to a daughter. Her features were a mirror image of her brothers. My father and my son were overjoyed. I alone felt deeply helpless. It was one thing for the son to look like him, but for my daughter to look exactly like him as well. Chunkao comforted me, saying, "My lady, please don't be sad. We can just have more children who look like you later." I gently stroked my abdomen, which still ached, and struggled to roll over. Chunkao, you are very kind. There is no need to comfort me further. By early summer, the first shipment of precious herbs was escorted to the Jiangzhou region. We made a net profit of over 30,000 taels. The shopkeeper sent a pigeon with a letter, claiming that if we shipped them to the capital, we could make an extra 10,000 taels. I had no desire for more money, and wanted nothing more to do with the capital. The shopkeeper then added, "The southern waterways are clear, and the bandits have been cleared out. We could transport unique northern herbs to the south for sale." A guard who was a native of the south explained, "Ever since last year, the imperial court has been cracking down on bandits. All the bandits on land and water have been wiped out. I heard General Qin led the missions himself. The people are all grateful, calling it a great service to the public, a deed of boundless merit." I smiled faintly and praised him sincerely. General Qin is truly a fine general. My son had begun his studies, and my daughter was learning to walk. Between raising my children in peace and occasionally heading into the mountains to acquire rare herbs, time slipped by. In the blink of an eye, over another year passed. My son shouted for help, pointing toward a ravine, saying someone had fallen from the mountain. I ordered my guards to head down and rescue them. A moment later, they carried up an elderly man with white hair. I had my accompanying physician treat his broken bones, and then arranged for him to be sent home. Months later, the old man suddenly appeared at my door. Carefully, He took a crystal-clear flower from his coat. The crowd gathered around gasped in astonishment. An ice lotus from the heavenly mountains, a legendary divine object. It is said to have the power to bring the dead back to life. The elders claim to have seen it save those on the brink of death. The old man looked around cautiously and asked in a trembling voice, "Shopkeeper Shen, could you offer a fair price? What price would you like?" The old man replied, "This item is priceless. I only offer it now because you saved my life. That is the only reason I am willing to part with it." He had lived in the mountains as a hunter for generations and had few expenses. He did not seek a fortune. The item was far too valuable. I insisted on giving him a generous reward. He only signaled for 20 bags of dry rations, some jerky, and a few bolts of cloth. I agreed immediately and added 10 extra bolts of cloth. I ordered my guards to escort him back to the mountains. News of this quickly spread. More and more people came to offer rare herbs, and people lined up to purchase the ice lotus. A few months later, a wealthy merchant from the capital arrived travel-worn, offering a fortune for the ice lotus. I shook my head. It is merely a legend. Whether it can truly save a life remains to be seen. May I ask why you wish to purchase it? The old merchant sighed. In his youth, he had nearly gone astray. It was thanks to the guidance of Grand Tutor Liu, who serves the current emperor. The Grand Tutor had a daughter late in life and cherished her like a precious gem. Several years ago, His Majesty issued a decree bestowing the young lady upon General Qin as his lawful wife. Yet, for reasons unknown, the general who had originally consented suddenly reneged. He even carried thorns on his back to beg forgiveness and call off the engagement. He was covered in blood. The Grand Tutor, being a proud man, immediately went to the palace to ask His Majesty to rescind the decree. I listened, stunned. The old merchant continued. General Qin subsequently headed south to quell an uprising and has not returned in 2 or 3 years. Poor Miss Liu is so devoted to him that she has vowed never to marry another. She has been depressed ever since, and these past few months she has fallen gravely ill. No medicine could cure her. The Grand Tutor searched everywhere for a cure to no avail. I heard that shopkeeper Shen possessed this treasure, so I traveled thousands of miles to find you, hoping to repay my benefactor. I let out a soft sigh. I never imagined that since leaving the capital, such things had transpired. The old merchant implored, "I hear that even half a petal has miraculous effects. Might shopkeeper Shen be willing to part with it? I am willing to pay 100,000 taels for half of it. I hope you will grant me this favor." I ordered Chun Tao to fetch the Tanshan ice lotus. I personally sliced off half. "Old sir, please send this off with all haste. I hear it is most effective if used within half a month. As for its efficacy, I have only heard rumors, so I cannot guarantee anything." The old merchant thanked me repeatedly and quickly ordered his subordinate to present the banknotes. I smiled and waved him off. "That will not be necessary." The old merchant looked puzzled. He said nervously, "Boss Shen, are you asking for a favor from the Grand Tutor? I would be honored to pass on your request. I will ensure he remembers your kindness." I shook my head. "That is unnecessary. General Qin and I are old acquaintances." The old merchant looked puzzled, but bowed respectfully and left with profuse thanks. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The next day, I had my people discreetly inquire about General Qin. Winter was fast approaching, and heavy snow began to fall. I sat on the heated kang, playing chess with my son, while watching my daughter practice paper cutting. Father was dozing off nearby, his snoring echoing through the room. Suddenly, a blast of cold air rushed through the doorway. "Mistress, it's bad. The Northern DI army has gathered near the border town, and it looks like they are preparing to attack." Father jolted awake, shivering all over. "War is coming." I furrowed my brows and commanded calmly, "Shut all our shops and residential gates. Seal all valuables and store them in the underground vault. Divide our reserves of grain and dried meat into 5 portions, and hide them separately in secret locations." I also ordered my guards to visit the herders, to purchase more milk, producing cows and sheep, in preparation for the children's needs. More than 10 days later, war broke out at the border as expected. In the freezing cold, I brought father and the children to hide in a mountain cave. This cave was recommended by a local hunter I knew, covering nearly an acre in size, and was both sheltered from the wind and warm. I left most of the guards at the residence in town, keeping only dozens to protect us personally. "Mistress, General Li has been holding the city gates with his men for days, but the enemy forces far outnumber ours. We have run out of food and ammunition. I fear we won't last past tonight. The Imperial reinforcements are still on the way. They likely won't arrive in time." I narrowed my eyes. I told father to take care of the children. "Leave 30 men to guard my father, my son, and my daughter. The rest of you come with me to the city. Bring your weapons, along with the grain and 20 sacks of medicine. We are going to support General Li." The guards replied in unison, "Yes. Be careful. Come back as soon as you can." I hugged my father and kissed my children, then rushed into the city with hundreds of guards. Most of the townspeople had their homes here and were unwilling to flee. Seeing us come to help, they flooded to the city walls to assist. General Li's armor was stained with blood, yet even past 50, his spirit was as vibrant as ever. He saluted me with gratitude. "Thank you, Brother Shen. Your patriotism is something I deeply admire. Once we drive back these invaders, we shall drink until we fall." I offered a faint smile and ordered my men to place themselves under the general's command. The war was far more brutal than I had imagined. Slaughter, bloody battles, war fires consuming the sky, corpses carpeting the fields, and rivers of blood became the norm. At first, I only handled the transport of medicine and dry rations, but as the casualties grew more severe, my personal guards and I were forced to take up arms. Since I was a child, I had traveled everywhere with my father and learned many self-defense techniques. These past few years in the Northwest, I had further honed my spearmanship and combat skills under masters. Brother Shen, you are a fine man. If we survive this, you and I shall become sworn brothers. I readily agreed. We held on for 3 more grueling days and nights. The number of guards at the gate dwindled. Reinforcements were still hundreds of miles away. Deep in the night, by the campfire, I bandaged the wound on General Li's arm. Brother Shen, do you have any children? A son and a daughter back home. General Li looked on with envy and sighed. More than 20 years ago, I insisted on shielding the civilians as they retreated. My wife and daughter both died at the hands of the Northern D. I let out a soft sigh. A man of ambition looks to the world. It is as it should be. All the people in this city, they are my family. I felt immense respect for him in my heart. Once we repel the enemy, I shall surely petition the imperial court to grant you a title. His words made me chuckle. As dawn began to break, the Northern DI launched another fierce assault. The city gate was on the verge of collapsing, all hanging by a thread. At that critical moment, a troop appeared, charging forward with torches held high. They pushed the enemy line back dozens of yards. Are those reinforcements? Do not open the gates. Beware of a trap. 2 lieutenants insisted. There were only a few hundred of them, certain they weren't reinforcements. Under no circumstances are we to open the gates. Before long, those few hundred were surrounded by the enemy army. Amidst the thick smoke, I spotted the leader in silver armor fighting bravely, his expression cold and lethal. My heart tightened in an instant. It is General Qin. Quick, open the gates and meet them. Brother Shen, it is hard to be certain. We cannot take that risk. It is General Qin. I cannot be mistaken. The vice generals tried to stop me. He has held off the attacking enemy. That is why the gates still stand. How can a few hundred men stand against an army of tens of thousands? Sound the drums quickly. Once the enemy sees us charge out, they will assume reinforcements have arrived, and they will surely flee in a panic. With that said, I led my guards down from the gate. Brother Shen, enough. Today we stake everything on this. All officers, hear my command. Follow me and charge. The city gates swung wide. The garrison troops poured out in a rush, joining forces with General Qin's men, fighting with all our might. The war drums thundered, mistaking us for the imperial reinforcements. The enemy immediately sounded their retreat and fled in chaos. Do not pursue a desperate foe. Fall back into the city. Amidst the chaotic glare of the fires, my gaze locked suddenly with General Qin's. I stood where I was, watching him silently. He did not move either, his eyes deep and calm. I knew he had recognized me, yet his expression remained unchanged. He quickly turned his horse around to rejoin General Li. It turned out the reinforcements were still half a day away, having lost contact with the front lines for some time. General Qin had led his personal guards ahead to scout the path. Seeing the gates were about to fall, and fearing the city would be lost, and the people would suffer, he charged in regardless of the danger. General Li was still shaken. If not for Brother Shen recognizing the general at a glance, the consequences would have been unthinkable. General Qin cast a subtle, fleeting glance at me, then immediately changed the subject. The reinforcements had lost contact with General Li for many days, since we have never met before. Opening the gates was a risky gamble indeed. Fortunately, our casualties were minimal, which is a true blessing for the nation. I couldn't be bothered to respond, no matter what I say. It is clear he just doesn't want to acknowledge my contribution. I, Shen Zhuyun, stepped forward at a life-or-death moment, having long since cast aside all thoughts of my own safety. I am not one to covet rewards from the imperial court. I immediately bade farewell to General Li and departed with my remaining guards. General Li tried hard to keep me, but I claimed I needed to return home to see my family, and only then did he agree. General Qin remained sitting in the tent, not saying a single word. I did not look back, and walked straight away. My father and the children were safe and sound, in good health. There were still enemy troops outside the city, so we had no choice but to stay in the cave. I was utterly exhausted, took a long refreshing hot bath, and collapsed into bed. When I woke up, it was already the next day. My daughter was sitting nearby with a whiny tone, her little face filled with displeasure. Mother, I want to go home. Is it not fun here? My son was sitting by the campfire reading, his eyes filled with longing. Mother, I want to go home too. I stroked my daughter's hair and said softly with a smile, all right, in 2 days, we shall go home. Afterward, I discussed it with my father. The Northwest is unlikely to be stable in the short term. It is spring now, and in half a month, the roads will no longer be frozen. I intend to donate these medicinal supplies to General Li. Then, I will pack up our belongings and return to my hometown to stay for a while. Father nodded repeatedly. It has been many years since we paid respects to our ancestors and your mother. It is high time we went back to visit. 3 days later, the enemy forces retreated. The imperial garrison reinforced the city walls, and restored order within the city. Daily life began to gradually recover. I brought my family back into the city. The surroundings were unusually quiet. Though I had my suspicions, I was merely an ordinary commoner, so it was not my place to pry. Over 10 days later, I loaded several carts with medicine and headed to the military camp. Only then did I learn that only a few thousand soldiers remained in the city. The great general and General Qin had already led 100,000 troops to pursue the northern DI. Those steppe wolves didn't really retreat far. They are just gathered 100 miles away, waiting for a chance to strike. If we don't deal them a heavy blow, they are certain to make a comeback. How many days ago did they set out? I couldn't help but ask. The soldiers who had defended the city with me didn't treat me like an outsider. They told me the truth. The army left 10 days ago. I cupped my hands and said, I will be heading south in the next few days. Please pass on a message to the great general for me. Before I could finish my sentence, panicked cries for help echoed from outside. It is a disaster. General Qin is critically wounded. Quick, fetch a military surgeon. The adjutant rushed out to meet them, crying out in shock. The surgeons have all gone with the army. Where is the general now? The messenger panted heavily and pointed toward the city gates. The general's wounds are extremely severe. The field surgeons were helpless. They ordered him to be rushed back to the city for life-saving medicine. I bolted out in pursuit, grabbing the messenger by the arm. Where's the general? I have life-saving medicine and the best doctor as well. A moment later, I saw General Qin unconscious in the carriage. He was covered in blood. An arrow lodged near his heart. Fresh blood was still pouring out. His personal guard Wang Bing said with red eyes. The army doctor said the field conditions were too harsh and that pulling the arrow out now would be fatal. If there's effective medicine in the city, there might still be a glimmer of hope. I immediately took charge. Carefully carry him into the room. The doctor will be here soon, and the life-saving medicine will arrive shortly. Seeing I had potent medicine, Wang Bing in his panic saw me as his last hope. He knelt and begged me to save General Qin at all costs. I had seen him at the general's estate before, but he was so distraught at this moment, he didn't recognize me in my male attire. I helped him up, ordering him to fetch warm water at once. The guards brought the necessary items quickly. I removed General Qin's armor and tunic, changing him into clean inner garments. The doctor hesitated. The general is unconscious. We must pull the arrow and stop the bleeding immediately. Master, feed him the ice lotus first, but his teeth were tightly clenched. It would be more effective if it could be chewed, the doctor noted. I didn't hesitate, took half a petal of the ice lotus and chewed it to pieces. I fed it to him mouth to mouth. I tapped his cheek gently, whispering softly, swallow it. He still possessed a sliver of consciousness. Instinctively swallowing the medicinal juice, the doctor breathed a sigh of relief, decisively removing the arrow and applying top-grade golden wound powder to stop the bleeding. My lady, rest assured, with the ice lotus protecting his heart, the general should survive. I leaned against the bedside, feeling drained, gazing at his face pale as paper. I hurriedly ordered the guards to fetch my long-treasured blood-enriching pills. Having dealt in medicinal herbs for years, I have hoarded countless rare medicines. I won't hesitate to use any of them now. As long as it is useful, I will give it all to him. The doctor was heartbroken. He whispered, even the nobles in the palace wouldn't be this generous. Wang Bing was deeply grateful to me and even kowtowed to thank me. Boss Shen, if I may be so bold, you look very familiar. You look just like an old acquaintance of the general's. I smiled helplessly and found an excuse to send him away. With the divine medicine and rare herbs keeping him alive, General Qin woke up 2 days later. He looked at me quietly. I avoided his gaze and coughed lightly as I stepped back. General, since you have awakened, you should be fine. The doctor is waiting outside. I shall take my leave now. Why must you be like this? General Qin said weakly, calling me back. If you care for me this much, why have you been hiding from me all these years? I forced a smile. General, our stations are too different. Why force it? I have a free spirit, and I do not seek forever. I only seek to have had you once. I am not greedy. This is enough. Hunt. General Qin stared hard at me and gritted his teeth. Back then I fought for you, even kneeling before the emperor to secure the title of side consort for you. I had exhausted all my efforts, but you scorned it and just walked away. You even faked being killed by pirates to deceive me. You at least are free and easy. Do you know how devastated I was? Do you know the agony of my heartbreak? My eyes welled up with tears before I knew it, but I still forced a smile. General, why go to such lengths? I was born to be untethered. I am not used to the rigid life within an official's estate, nor can I bear to share a husband with another. We were not meant to be spouses for a lifetime, but to be fleeting lovers. That is not out of the question. General Qin glared at me with resentment. Is that truly how you think? I nodded. The room was filled with silence, save for our shallow breathing. After a long moment, he reached out with a long, strong hand, seeming to sigh softly, and whispered, come here. I took a step forward, holding him down. Don't move around so much. Be careful not to tear your wounds. General Qin gazed at me intently, muttering, hey Yuan, don't go. Let me look at you a while longer. Would you? All these years, I fought bandits and enemies, sustaining over a dozen wounds of all sizes. I had grown accustomed to it, but only this time have I been this close to death. The moment the arrow struck me, I suddenly felt regretting that I didn't stop you those days ago, regretting that I didn't hold you one more time. Tears streamed down my face, and I leaned in to nestle against his chest. General Qin groped for my hand, holding it tightly. Yuan, just have pity on me, and stay with me for a few days, would you? I let out a low sigh. I finally nodded. Over the next few days, under the care of the doctor and myself, General Qin recovered remarkably fast, but his life had been snatched back from the jaws of death, so it was inevitable that there would be lingering effects. The doctor warned. The general's heart meridian was grazed by the arrowhead. It is a miracle he survived it all. From now on, you must absolutely never use your internal energy. Otherwise, the meridian may rupture, and your life may not be saved. General, you must keep this in mind. General Qin frowned. Is it never again? Or just not for a dozen years or so? The doctor pondered and said, you must not under any circumstances in the near term. The future depends entirely on your recovery. Occasional light exertion might not be fatal, but do not take any risks. Normal daily activities are fine. Otherwise, you are walking on the edge of a cliff. Though General Qin felt a sense of loss, he soon came to terms with it. To have kept my life is already a blessing. I dare not ask for more. I smiled lightly. General Li has won a complete victory, and the troops are returning to the capital. The world is finally at peace for now. It would be quite nice for you to be an idle general from now on, wouldn't it? General Qin squeezed my hand and said softly, when poor one attends to their own virtue, when successful one saves the world. Fortunately, I have fought for my country and its people, and have not failed the emperor's training and trust. I held him with a heartache. He gently embraced me in return. A month later, General Qin left 50,000 troops to guard the border town, and led the remainder with General Li back to the capital to report. He gripped my hand tightly. Where will you go from here? Once I am finished with my duties, I will come to find you. I thought for a moment and said, I plan to return to my family home in Jiangzhou. Our old family estate is near the Huilu ferry. He smiled. He nodded excitedly. I know that place. I will certainly come to find you. However, I dared not commit. He lowered his voice. Yuan, I am no longer the man I once was. Now, I have the courage to speak to His Majesty. Whether I succeed or not, I will come looking for you. Yuan, I am not young anymore. I want you to bear me a child who looks like you. At the mention of a child, I belatedly realized something. My monthly cycle was more than half a month late. I was instantly flustered. I quickly waved my hands. I'll head back and pack my things first. You and General Li go back to the capital first. My father and I will head to Jiangzhou. General Qin eventually left. He promised to meet me in Jiangzhou in a month. Seeing me take so long to return, my father had already sent people to urge me several times. The moment I arrived home, he went on a long rant. You said you'd be right back, and yet you were gone for 2 months. No money earned. The children left behind, dumping everything on me. In my past life I must have. Father, I'm pregnant again. I cut him off. My father's eyes widened instantly. He was stunned for a long time. What? Pregnant with what? I patted my lower abdomen. I said, I'm pregnant with our third. My father's expression changed immediately. He trotted over with delight and carefully helped me sit down. My dear girl, is this for real? Have you seen a doctor? I sighed. I have. Over a month along. Father glares at me. Pregnancy is a blessing. Why are you sighing? The second one is already 2. It is high time for another. Our family tree is sparse. Having more children is a wonderful thing. I rub my temples. If the children's father finds out, there is no telling how he'll kick up a fuss. What? Father exclaims, stunned. Again? Is it that same Qin fellow again? I ask in return, who else could it be? Besides him, who else would it be? Father's eyes shift away. He stammers, you've gone too far. Fooling him once or twice is one thing, but you've done it 3 times now. I almost feel sorry for the lad. I roll my eyes at him. I decide to tell him everything about General Qin. He said he'd come find us in Jiangzhou once he is free. Father feels dizzy from the news. I quickly help him sit down. Father, are you alright? Don't scare me like that. Father gasps for air, blinking his eyes. It's not me scaring you. You're scaring me. Out of everyone you could have picked, you had to set your sights on someone so noble. Fooling him once would have been enough, but you've played him 3 times over. Are you trying to court disaster? I feel aggrieved too. If he were just a common gentleman, I would have tricked him into marrying me long ago. But he truly suits my heart. No. Absolutely not. Father waved his hands repeatedly. Our Shen family has never dealt with the powerful. You know this better than anyone. I shrugged my shoulders. I know. But he can't help that he likes me, and I like him too. How can you be so sure? Father frowned. I whispered. He defied an imperial decree to refuse a marriage for me. He bore the thorns to beg for forgiveness, ending up covered in wounds. He still bears the scars to this day. He thought I had perished at the hands of pirates. For over 3 years he hunted bandits everywhere, never once returning to the capital. Later, when he learned I was in the northwest, he specifically requested to be sent there to battle the enemy, nearly losing his own life in the process. Father, his feelings for me are sincere. Upon hearing this, Father let out a long sigh. His feelings may be sincere, but can he be a match for you? You have been used to your freedom since you were a child. You are an eagle that soars through the sky. Unless your nature is worn torn away. You cannot be caged. I was stunned. Father sighed again. We may be wealthy, but in the eyes of the powerful, we are, in the end, mere lowly merchants. Such a gap in status will only lead to you suffering endless scorn and grievances. Father said no more. He turned to instruct Chunkywo to stew some bird's nest for me, and then left to accompany his grandson, perhaps due to my heavy heart, or perhaps because this pregnancy was particularly taxing. I was dizzy and vomiting constantly. I felt drowsy all day long. After taking the medicine prescribed by the doctor, the morning sickness eased slightly, but my energy remained extremely poor. I was either fast asleep or staring blankly out the window. My son and daughter were very attentive, reading poetry and singing to me. They even drew a cute little portrait of me. In the drawing, I looked haggard and pale, but my belly was bulging high. I was taken aback for a moment and asked Chun Tao, "Do you think my belly is much bigger than it was at 3 months?" "It is," Chun Tao nodded. "Perhaps it's a chunkier little master." Father was deeply worried. I couldn't eat or sleep well, yet my belly kept growing larger. Could there be something wrong with the baby? Chun Tao hurried to summon the physician. The physician checked my pulse for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "My lady, it is highly likely that this is a twin pregnancy." "Truly?" Father was pleasantly surprised. "Are you certain?" The physician said confidently. "I am 90% sure. If you are still concerned, my lady, you may come back for another checkup next month." I waved my hand happily. "That won't be necessary. I trust your medical expertise, but you must ease your mind and avoid excessive worry. Otherwise, it will harm both you and the babies." I nodded gently. "My dear daughter, do whatever you wish. As long as you are well, I shall have no regrets." I smiled and hugged his chubby arm. If I really took the children to find him, I would only be mocked by the nobility, accused of being promiscuous, a woman with no name or status, bearing children out of wedlock. The 4 children would also be seen as bastards, not even worthy of being called children of a concubine. How could we ever be all right? I care for Chin Shu in my heart, but my head is still clear. I haven't lost my senses. Father stroked my hair, his expression full of pity. "Then what do you intend to do? Find another place to hide?" "I'm done hiding," I said softly. "If he truly wants to find me, he could track me to the ends of the earth. I may never be able to stand by his side, but this time, I won't run anymore. I'll leave the difficult decision to him." And so, I called my son over and had him add himself and his sister to the little drawing, along with their signatures at the bottom. The next morning, I rolled the drawing into a thin scroll and tied it to a carrier pigeon bound for the capital, instructing the merchant there to deliver it to the general's estate. 20 days later, I received a reply from the merchant. He said he had personally handed the letter to the general's steward. General Qin, who had been in the palace attending to the sick, rushed to the firm upon hearing the news to demand the meaning of the drawing. At first, the merchant didn't understand it either, until he saw the signatures and then explained it was drawn by my eldest son. He said. General Qin fell silent for a moment. Before storming off in a rage, Chunkao asked, worriedly, "Miss, what if the general thinks the children are someone else's? What will you do then?" "Then so be it," I said indifferently. "If he lacks even that much trust, then he isn't much of a man to be with." Another 10 days passed, and a sealed letter delivered by an express rider reached my hands. The handwriting was bold and powerful, with a hint of anger hidden beneath the fluid strokes. There were only a few words on the paper, but they made my heart skip a beat. "Mother, why are you so nervous? Your father, who supposedly came back from the dead to settle the score with me. My eldest is 8 years old now, long past the age where he can be easily fooled. Ever since his little sister was born, and with me now carrying twins, he has constantly hounded me about who his father is." I felt helpless and had no choice but to tell him the truth. The commander who led the reinforcements to a great victory recently is his own biological father. The boy immediately began to idolize General Qin as a legendary hero, asking every few days, "When will father be back? Is it almost time?" "Almost." "Does the letter contain harsh words? Why does father say you lied to him?" "No, he just said not to rush him. He will come to find us as soon as he is finished with his duties." The boy laughed with excitement and turned to run outside. "Little sister, father is coming home soon. Father said he is coming to find us once he is done with his work." Watching my son's joyful back, my eyes grew red without me realizing it. To think that deep down, my child craves a father so deeply. By now, I was over 5 months pregnant, and my belly had grown unusually large. The winters in the northwest are too harsh, and they are not good for your pregnancy or for the birth. To be safe, let's travel by land and water and head back to our home in Jiangzhou. It was just turning into autumn, and the weather was perfect for travel. The twins' development had also stabilized, so we set off. Before our bags were even fully packed, General Li arrived at our door with a smile. He had been granted the title of Marquis, and his soldiers had also received various rewards. "Mistress Shen, you, a heroine among women, have been rewarded as well. The emperor heard of your deeds and praised them highly. He has bestowed upon you the title of County Lady and called for all women of the realm to take you as their example." I was quite taken aback. Marquis Li bowed with his hands clasped and laughed. "Congratulations, Lady of the County. As early as a month ago, His Majesty issued an edict bestowing the Zhangja Imperial Villa upon you, renaming it the Manor of the Lady of the County. He also granted you 1,000 taels of gold, and over a dozen carts of treasures and silks, which have already been transported to the manor. I have only done my humble bit, and feel unworthy of such a gift. Oh, you saved General Qin's life. You are fully deserving of it. His Majesty calls you a benefactor of the imperial court, which is why he has bestowed this unique honor upon you. This is what you are owed. I wondered to myself, could this be an arrangement made by Qin Cheng? Yet, I maintained a calm expression, only saying we were packing our bags to head south. Marquis Li was quite reluctant to see us go, urging us to visit often in the future, and promising he would certainly come to visit the manor. I readily agreed. Before parting, Marquis slipped an envelope into my hand and whispered, General Qin requested that you open this yourself. I nodded calmly, though I was secretly curious. The letter was as brief as ever, containing only one sentence. Take care of yourself and the children, and do not believe the rumors. Although I was puzzled, I still tucked it away carefully, and went out for a walk with my daughter. 3 days later, I left the staff and manager behind to continue managing the herbal medicine business, and our party set off in a grand procession toward the south, with the elderly and the young in our carriages, and being 6 months pregnant myself, our pace was slow. Marquis Li sent men to escort us the entire way, and only when we boarded the ship did the soldiers bid us farewell. I had Chun Tao reward each of them with 10 taels of silver, and I stood at the bow to personally thank them and see them off. Only then did I order the ship to set sail, traveling downriver. The journey was smooth and steady, yet we were almost entirely cut off from the outside world. More than 10 days later, the boat reached Lake Dongting. It just so happened to be the Mid-Autumn Festival. Both banks were festooned with lanterns, and the scent of osmanthus filled the air. The 2 children were overjoyed, clamoring to go ashore and play. Father and Chunkao each took one by the hand, and they went up to the shore. I did not dare go where the crowds were thick, so I sat in a pavilion by the bank, enjoying the moon and eating mooncakes. The streets were bustling with people, filled with laughter and cheer. Nearby, some young women were releasing floating lanterns, whispering among themselves, last year and the year before, I wish to marry a man like General Qin. I still haven't changed my wish this year. Why would you? Even though General Qin is gone, his presence was truly peerless. I must find someone like him. Even half as good would do. You really are obsessed. The moon cake in my hand dropped to the ground with a thud. I was instantly seized by panic. My guard noticed, and hurried forward to ask with concern. My heart was in turmoil. My mind went completely blank, and I could barely draw a breath. Go and find out what happened to General Qin. Seeing my pale face, Shahi and the guard hurriedly helped me back to the boat. They rushed to fetch a doctor. My lady, you have suffered a great shock. You must remain calm. The child in your womb cannot withstand such emotional turmoil. I gasped for air, asking anxiously, are they back? Have you found any news? Shahi stamped her feet in distress. My dear mistress, you have been through so much in your life. How did you get so scared? I heard someone say. Somebody said he. Shahi fanned me, while urging me saying, there are plenty of rumors on the street. Why take them seriously? Before she finished speaking, General Qin's words flashed in my mind. Do not trust rumors. At that moment, I felt somewhat calmer, and my breathing gradually slowed. The doctor hurried off to brew some medicine to calm the fetus. After taking it, I lay down in bed, gazing at the moonlight over the lake outside the window. The guard returned to report. There are indeed rumors in the capital that General Qin has passed away, but the truth is unclear. Last month, the Empress Dowager passed away, and court was suspended for 7 days. The civil and military officials escorted the coffin to the imperial mausoleum. Some say the general collapsed on the road, claiming it was an old ailment triggered by extreme grief, leaving him unable to recover. They say the general's residence held a funeral shortly after. I waved my hand and said, the truth of this is still unknown. Do not spread these groundless rumors, and do not let the young master and young miss know. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, the boat continued its journey. 3 days later, we reached the shore. Government officials were already waiting on the dock to escort us to the manor of the county princess. We disembarked and boarded our carriages in less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. We arrived at the grand and elegant manor. This place was originally an imperial summer palace, featuring carved beams and painted pillars. Breathtakingly beautiful, the 2 children ran around, gasped in constant amazement. Father wiped away tears of excitement, saying that the Shen family had been merchants for generations, and finally, in my generation, we could stand tall, no longer needing to worry about the officials' attitudes or act submissively. But I was distracted. I pondered to myself, how is Qin Shu really doing with such generous rewards from the court? Could it be that he arranged this in secret? My eldest son exclaimed, Father. I turned around abruptly. A tall, elegant figure was walking out slowly. His posture was upright, clad in a pale green robe, as gentle and graceful as a painting. My eldest son ran toward him, but stopped as he drew near, gazing at him intently, then bowed respectfully. Are you really my father? Mother says you are a great hero who defeats bad guys, and others say that if I meet someone who looks just like me, he must be my father. Qin Shu looked moved, studying his son closely, then squatted down. I am. My little daughter trotted over too, bolder than her brother, and threw herself straight into his arms. I knew you were father. Father is so handsome." Chin Shu was filled with joy, opening his arms wide to pull both children tightly into his embrace. Father looked at him, then back at me, offering an awkward, apologetic smile. Chin Shu let the children go and bowed respectfully to father. "Respected father-in-law, please accept my bow." Father waved his hands in alarm. "No, you mustn't. You are a general." "Father-in-law, I am no longer a general. I am just Chin Shu of the Shen household, your son-in-law, and the children's father." Father stood frozen for a moment, realizing that, after Chin Shu and General Li returned to the capital, His Majesty initially intended to reward them handsomely, but he petitioned once again for a marriage decree, asking to take me as his wife. His Majesty was troubled, and the Empress Dowager was also adamant in her refusal, claiming that because I came from a merchant family, my status was too low, ordering him to marry a woman from a noble house instead, and allowing me only the position of a concubine. Chin Shu flatly refused. At that time, General Li in the imperial court reported my deeds of providing food and medicine and leading the people to defend the city to the death. He spoke of me with great praise. The emperor wished to bestow an honor upon me, but was at a loss as to what title to grant. Chin Shu then took the initiative to resign, claiming his heart had been severely damaged. "I can no longer use my inner strength. I am unable to lead troops for the imperial court any longer. I humbly beg your majesty to take back my command." The emperor asked him what his heart truly desired. He only said, "I wish to spend my life with her, roaming the world, far away from the capital." The emperor was both frustrated and regretful, yet he had no other choice. Shortly after, the Empress Dowager fell ill and passed away. Chin Shu received that small drawing from his son, feeling a mix of shock, joy, and anger. He left the palace to track down the shopkeeper and demand answers, only to learn that I had already given birth to his son overseas, naming him Shen Muchen. After leaving the capital, I gave birth to a daughter in the northwest. He took the small drawing into the palace and knelt before the emperor. "I have been drifting abroad all these years and have long since grown indifferent to fame and fortune. I only wish to stay with the one I love, to raise our children, and live a quiet, simple life." Upon learning the full story of what had happened, the emperor felt for this distinguished and meritorious general, having encountered such a proud and free-spirited woman who would rather raise her children alone than be reduced to a concubine. He finally relented. The emperor secretly gave his consent. Once the Empress Dowager's funeral was over, he would arrange a foolproof path for him. The Empress Dowager passed away. Chin Shu was overwhelmed with grief, which aggravated an old injury to his heart. He collapsed near the imperial mausoleum, seeing the scars all over his body. The emperor finally softened his heart. He allowed him to lay down his armor and leave the capital to pursue his beloved and a life of his own. Thus, the emperor bestowed great rewards upon me, granting me the status of a lady and an imperial residence. At the same time, the word spread in the capital that General Qin had passed away in his prime. Because of the recent mourning for the Empress Dowager, no wedding was held, and the funeral arrangements were kept simple. The very next day, Chin Shu quietly slipped out of the capital with his loyal men. They traveled south, and by the time we arrived, they had already settled the new residence. Father's eyes turned red, and he nodded repeatedly. "Good son-in-law. Our family is finally reunited." Chin Shu held one child in each hand. "From now on, we are a family reunited, never to be parted again." I supported my large belly, watching them enjoy each other's company, feeling rather left out on the side, with no one paying me any mind. For the next few days, father and the children hovered entirely around Chin Shu. Yet, he didn't even spare me a glance. I tried to squeeze in a few times, but was completely ignored. By deep night, the elderly and children were all asleep. Chin Shu only focused on reviewing the children's schoolwork, turning his back to me. Just as I was feeling gloomy, the baby in my belly suddenly started kicking up a storm. My stomach was heaving and rolling. A bright idea struck me, and clutching my belly, I let out a soft cry of ouch, ouch. "What is wrong? Is something wrong with the baby?" He scrambled over, panicked and stuttering. He rushed to my side, seeing him so flustered. I didn't dare push it too far. I just frowned and pretended to be in pain. "They're kicking again." Chin Shu nervously placed his hand on my belly. His look turned from surprise to hesitation. Are they fighting in there? They've been restless. They stir every few hours. I can't get comfortable at night. I'm always so tired, yet I can't fall asleep." Chin Shu looked both heartbroken and helpless. He gave me a stern look. "This is all your fault." I pouted, my eyes brimming with tears. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lied to you, but just think about it. I've been raising the children on my own, running around to make a living. Was it easy? If you had only married me properly back then, the kids and I wouldn't have been left to suffer alone for so many years." Chin Shu was speechless after my retort. He pulled me into his arms. "Yes, it is my fault. It is my incompetence. It is my oversight. I never expected that you. How do you always manage to get your way? The children aren't just mine alone. I carried them for 10 months and risked my life to bring them into the world, yet they all look exactly like you. Not a single one looks like me. I worked so hard to raise them. And you just waltz in and reap the rewards. Maybe I did steal your seed, but I'm the one who carried and raised them, and you have the nerve to blame me. Chin-Shu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You let me throw my little tantrums. Listening to you, it is as if I'm the one who is always wrong. I can't win an argument with you. I'll do whatever you want. I wrap my arms around his neck and ask softly, are you still mad at me? Chin-Shu gives a slight huff. How could I dare to be? I said I'd get my revenge with interest, but I can't bring myself to hit or scold you. Forget it. I'll just punish you by making you have a few more. My head throbs just hearing that, and I point to my belly. There are 2 in here already. If I have any more, I'll be nothing but a brood. So Chin-Shu's eyes widen in pleasant surprise. Really? Are they twins? The pregnancy has been exhausting. Chin-Shu instantly begins to dote on me. He helps me lie down, propping me up with soft pillows, and carefully massages my shoulders and legs. Watching him scurry about taking care of me, I can't help but smile. This guy is just too easy to trick. From now on, I'm going to keep tricking him for the rest of our lives. 4 months later, I safely give birth to a boy and a girl. Chin-Shu is beyond thrilled. He holds one in each arm, never seeming to get enough of them. I, however, feel quite downcast. Why does neither of them look like me? Their brows and eyes are exactly like yours. Chunkao comforts me from the side. My lady, it's even better that they look like the general. The general is even better looking than you are. Don't worry, you can just have a few more that look like you later. I sigh. Your comforting is very effective. Chin-Shu laughs heartily. My eldest son and daughter carry my surname, Shen. The twins carry his Chin. I couldn't help but ask, you're not even concerned about the surname anymore? Chin-Shu smiled gently. Bearing the name Chin now is just fine, no matter how noble. It cannot compare to a family being together. I beamed with joy. From then on, Chin-Shu and I lived a peaceful and leisurely life. Every day was filled with laughter as we raised our 4 children. We would often leave the little ones with father and sneak away to enjoy the mountains and streams. Our business was still running, but our family wealth was already immense. Plus the land and assets Chin-Shu had accumulated over the years. We were wealthy enough to own the whole region. 3 years later, Chin-Shu and I took the children to the capital to celebrate the emperor's birthday. To avoid attention, His Majesty met us specially at a suburban palace. His Majesty was quite fond of the lively children, praising me for how well I had raised them. He bestowed upon us countless treasures and estates. Looking at the spirited Chin-Shu, he said with a kind smile, Lady Shen, you possess quite a talent. Under the heavens, you are the only one who could steal away my most capable general. Chin-Shu and I exchanged a smile. That night, we were cooling off in a lakeside pavilion, gazing at the shimmering lake surface. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Chin-Shu was puzzled. What are you laughing at? I raised an eyebrow and said, many years ago, father was angry that I was too picky and asked if I wanted to marry a celestial deity or a dragon prince from the depths. Chin-Shu looked on with great interest. How did you answer? I pointed to the lake and said, deities are too far away, so I'll just marry the dragon prince from the water. Who knew that as soon as I turned around, I would see you floating on the water? Chin-Shu burst into laughter. I laughed along with him, tightly holding his hand, our fingers laced together.